relationship. If it's a marriage, boy, that can destroy a person's faith, especially if one person, the aggressor, has a position of authority or a position of respect in that church, and they're the aggressor. That can really mess with the victim's view of the faith. So, like I say, being a leader of a faith organization, really, you really got to be careful, because not only can you affect that relationship, but you can also affect their faith. And faith and hope is something that religion gives that can be a huge motivator in that person healing and getting better. So we're going to go through some different ways that leaders can help out in that situation. Obviously, the structure of a lot of religious organizations and the pressures of religious organizations to keep marriages together is good, but can also be harmful. If someone's in a really toxic relationship where there's a lot of physical abuse, and they're using either the structure of religion or the pressure to stay together, that can be very, very difficult. Most leaders in any kind of religious organization are going to preach repentance and forgiveness. And of course, those things are things that everyone would want everyone to. Everyone makes mistakes, so you want to preach that, you want to send that message, but we've got to make sure and listen to our victims and believe those victims and find out what kind of relationship they are before we keep sending them back to a situation that could get them hurt and or worse, and get those children in a relationship that's not going to be good for them also.
It's fine. So just to elaborate on the importance of faith leaders, you have, like what Matt said, a very unique position where, statistically speaking, I believe it was 40% of victims seek assistance from a faith-based leader before calling police, before accessing other services. I could be wrong on that statistic, but it was a high statistic. And so it's really important that we are educating our faith-based leaders, because having a faith-based leader explain and help a victim ensure that they are safe, encouraging the abuser to get help, and actually opening up a discussion about domestic violence can really be empowering. It's really important that we're not naive about the prevalence of domestic violence in our communities. If you have a victim that's coming in and is disclosing some of the abuse that's going on in the home, and you sit there and in disbelief that you can't believe that this would happen, it can shut down the victim. They may not want to talk about it more. They may not feel like they're going to be believed. And so it's important that you make sure that the abuser is the one that's responsible for the violence, and that the victim is not the one at fault, and that you articulate that to our victim, that this is not their fault, they're not to blame for this, and that the children are never the ones that are causing the violence. It's important to understand the profile of a domestic violence victim. Many of these women will not acknowledge that they are in a violent relationship, but we want to provide you with some tools and some signs that can be indicators that somebody in your community is a victim of domestic violence. And some of those things are that they have unexplained injuries, that they seem to be sick and don't have specific symptoms, that they are obsessive and compulsive and they seem to be shut off and isolated from family and friends, that they have children who may disrespect them and order them around, and that they seem to be constantly walking on eggshells. These are just a few indicators of somebody who may be a victim of domestic violence. And some people wonder why it's not reported. What are some of these barriers that are keeping both women and men from reporting to the police? And some of the things that we want to touch on is that they are afraid of what the abuser will do if this is brought to light. Not knowing where to go for help, not understanding the resources available in the community, which is one reason why we are doing these presentations, is to educate community members about the resources that are available. They may be not willing to break up the family. And in Utah County, religious belief about families and breaking, divine law and not wanting to break up a family is a huge factor. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with victims over the years where it's not until their bishop or pastor that tells them you need to leave that they finally leave. We can try to work with them and help them see how dangerous the situation is, but it's the faith-based leaders that have that relationship with them. They trust you, and they want your advice, they want your support, and they need your help. And so it's really important that you recognize the prevalence that is happening. So some of the key factors for faith leaders when working with domestic violence is recognizing that her behavior is not the cause of this violence. Changing her behavior is never going to change his. Making sure that she has dinner prepared on time, the house is clean, that she doesn't overspend or stays within a certain budget. Those things, even if changed and acted perfectly, does not change an abuser's personality. So it's really important to keep that in mind when working with victims. So one thing that is important also, in being a faith-based leader, you have a unique position where you often are a mentor, a counselor, and you're wanting to keep this family unit together. You're wanting to help in any way that you can. But it's okay to recognize that unless you are a licensed domestic violence therapist, do not provide counseling. This is beyond what you're capable of doing. And so making sure that you have the referrals necessary to get somebody else involved that can help professionally is okay. You don't have to have all the answers. Calling the Bishop hotline is one for the LDS community. And so that's something to just keep in mind when working with victims.